Here's something nobody told you. The price of your next iPhone, your next laptop, your next pair of sneakers. It was decided in a meeting you were never invited to, by people you never voted for, using a tool most Americans don't even know exists. It's called a tariff. And right now, a 10% version of it is quietly reshaping the entire global economy. Here's the part that should make you pay attention. It's not the 10% that's dangerous. It's what happens after. Let's set the scene. You run a small electronics company in Ohio. You do not manufacture anything yourself. You are an assembler. Circuit boards come from Taiwan. The casing comes from Vietnam. The chips come from South Korea. You put it all together, slap on your label, and sell across the United States. Your margins are thin, maybe 12% on a good year. You have spent a decade squeezing every cent out of your operation. Then, one morning you wake up and the government adds a 10% tax on imports from all three of those countries. Do the math. Your costs just jumped. Your margins just evaporated. And here is the brutal part. You cannot raise your prices because your competitor down the street sources from slightly different countries and still undercuts you. So, what do? This is not a hypothetical. This is the exact situation thousands of American businesses found themselves in when the Trump administration escalated tariffs in early 2026. Most of them had no good answer. Now, before we go further, let's clear up one massive misconception. When the United States puts a 10% tariff on Chinese goods, most people assume China pays that 10%. They do not. The foreign manufacturer does not write a check to Washington. The American importer does. You do. The business importing those goods pays the tax at the border. So when politicians say we are making China pay, what is actually happening is American businesses are paying a tax to the American government for buying from China. That is the actual mechanism. And understanding that changes everything. So who eats the cost? The importer has three options. Option 1, absorb it. Accept lower margins and hope things get better. Option 2, raise prices. Pass the cost to the consumer. Option 3, find a new supplier in a country that is not being taxed. In the real world, all three happen at once, and every single one of them creates a new problem. Here is where it gets interesting. When buyers start scrambling for new suppliers, they assume there is some backup factory somewhere, just waiting to take the business. There is not. Vietnam cannot build 50 new semiconductor factories in a year. Mexico does not have a warehouse full of trained engineers ready to go. Moving a supply chain is not like switching banks. It takes 2 to 3 years, hundreds of millions in investment, and a completely new web of relationships and contracts. So in the short term, everyone is stuck. And while they are stuck, something else starts happening. Something quieter and way more damaging. Companies stop making big commitments. Think about it. If you don't know what your import costs will look like in 18 months, would you sign a 5-year supplier contract? Would you invest in new equipment? Would you hire 50 more people? No. You wait. You watch. You shrink. And when thousands of businesses do this at the same time, the economy starts to contract even before a single factory moves. Economists call this demand compression. And once it starts, it spreads fast. Your Taiwanese circuit board supplier gets a smaller order. So they cut their production run. Their copper supplier in Japan ships less. That logistics company drops a shipping route. Fewer containers cross the Pacific. Freight prices spike. What started as a 10% tax on one product category has now touched a dozen industries across 5 countries, none of which had any say in the policy. There is a name for this in economics: the bullwhip effect. A small change at one end of the chain creates massive swings at the other end. Tariffs do not just raise prices, they inject chaos into a system that was built around stability. Now, let's be fair. Tariffs aren't evil. They do create winners. American steel producers, they loved the steel tariffs. Demand went up, prices went up, business was good. And in communities where steel mills are the main employer, that matters a lot. These are real jobs, real families, real towns. But here's the math that doesn't make it into the press releases. A tariff that protects 10,000 steelworker jobs raises the cost of steel for every single industry that uses it. Cars, appliances, construction, bridges, all of it gets more expensive. The Peterson Institute ran the numbers on the 2018 steel tariffs. For every 1,000 jobs saved in the steel industry, about 75,000 jobs were lost in industries that use steel. That's not an opinion. That's the math. And there is one more thing. The countries being targeted do not just sit there and take it. China retaliated in 2018 with tariffs of their own. They hit American soybeans. Exports collapsed. American farmers lost billions of dollars. The government stepped in with subsidies to bail them out. So, who paid for the trade war in the end? American taxpayers did. They funded subsidies for farmers to replace income lost because of tariffs that were supposed to hurt China. So where does this go from here? The honest answer is, we don't know yet, but there are signals. The biggest trend is something called friendshoring. Instead of buying from the cheapest country, companies are moving production to politically safe countries: Mexico, India, Vietnam, Poland. It is slower. It is more expensive, but it reduces the risk of waking up one morning and finding out your supply chain just became 10% more expensive overnight. The problem is this transition takes years, and while it is happening, everyone pays more. Higher prices at the store, slower investment by businesses, more volatility in global trade, and a world economy that is gradually splitting into separate trading blocks instead of one interconnected system. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? It depends on who you ask. Some say it builds resilience. Others say it just builds costs. What is not debatable is this: a 10% tariff is never just a 10% tariff. By the time it is done traveling through the system, it has become something much larger and much harder to undo. If this video made you think differently about how trade actually works, hit subscribe. See you next time.